In the 305, bitches treat me like I'm Uncle Lou.
Well, gone is the $4 million a year youth pastor. That's right, the football Jesus, Mark Richt, chose to take early retirement. He's out at the Miami Hurricanes, and in is former defensive coordinator and longtime Miami resident Manny Diaz. What's the best case and what's the worst case scenario for the Miami Hurricanes football team in 2019? Let's find out right now. Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And two, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Sometimes they're even watchable. Give this video a thumbs up if you're a Miami fan or if you're excited about spring practice, which is going on at most colleges right now, culminating in the spring games coming up a few weeks down the road. Of course, March Madness tournament going on right now. Two, really kicks off today. You had a couple of games yesterday, the quote-unquote play-in games, but it really gets started today around noon. I'll be watching a lot of that tournament today. And I'm going to do a live show tonight. I know I've been gone from the live shows for a while. I'm going to do a live show tonight at the regular time, 10 o'clock. So you guys tune in. We'll take some phone calls, talk some March Madness, talk some spring football, some Miami Hurricanes, whatever it is you guys want to talk about. That'll be tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern here on the channel. I do have a tournament bracket set up. I'm not sure if it's too late to join it or not since a couple of games were played yesterday, but I'll put the link down in the description of this video again today. And if you guys want to try to sign up and get in the LouTube tournament bracket challenge that we're doing, click that link. It'll take you over there. Get yourself signed up. The winner will get something. I don't know. But anyway, let's get into today's video, the Miami Hurricanes. All right, this is the 6th or 7th video we've done in this series, and we're going to do a bunch of these videos over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, however long it takes for me to cover all the teams that you guys want to see and all the teams that I want to see. So far, I've been doing suggestions from the Patreon page. There's a link in the description of the video that'll take you over to the Uncle Lou Patreon page too if you want to support the channel, which I would really appreciate. But all the videos I've done up to this point have been suggestions from over there from Patreon members, and I still have some suggestions from the Patreon members to get to, but I've decided today to go ahead and do the Miami Hurricanes because they're in the news right now, right? Quarterback Tate Martell transferred from Ohio State to Miami in the offseason. Now, he's been at Ohio State for 2 years, right? He redshirted his first year, played in a few games last year. So technically, he was one of these transfers that had to sit out a year. He appealed, and his waiver has been approved. So Tate Martell will be immediately eligible for the Miami Hurricanes in 2019. That's a big deal if you're a Miami fan, I think, right? Quarterback has been one of their biggest issues over the last few years, sort of the offense in general, right? But let's just be real. Anytime the offense is struggling, first person people are going to look at is going to be the quarterback. Tate Martell's got a ton of talent. Played well at Ohio State when he played. Played in, what did he play in, 6 or 8 games last year. Completed a very high percentage of passes, and he can run the ball. He averaged 5 or 6 yards a carry running the ball for Ohio State. We'll see what type of offense Miami decides to go with and which quarterback they decide to go with. Of course, it's most likely coming down to Tate Martell and N'Kosi Perry. Now, N'Kosi Perry played a lot last year and was not impressive. I think he completed about 50% of his passes, and he only averaged about 2.5 yards per carry. So if you just compare the stats from Tate Martell to Perry, obviously Martell looks like the better guy. Miami fans, I know, want Tate Martell to be the guy. Now, typically, somebody in Perry's situation would have a built-in advantage over Tate Martell in that he's been in the program for a couple of years and would know the system, know the offense, know the calls, know the plays, that kind of thing. But because Miami has changed coaches this year, of course, that advantage is no longer there. An entirely new offensive system being installed, new coaches all the way around at Miami. So that inherent advantage that a returning player would normally have at a school is not there for Perry this year. My personal opinion, I think they should roll the dice and go with Tate Martell, unless for some reason Perry is just obviously way better during spring, summer, and fall workouts than Tate Martell, which I'm not so sure will be the case. I think Manny Diaz should roll the dice and go with Tate Martell. He's a first-year head coach. You get some leeway as a first-year head coach that you don't get in any other year, in my opinion. Now, I know Miami fans don't want to hear anything about rebuilding or Manny Diaz having to take a year to learn how to be a head coach. I get it. Miami wants to get back to winning in a big way. And I completely understand that, and I'm not saying that they can't do that this year. My point is, if you're ever going to take a risk as a head coach, I think your first year out of school, especially if you're a first-year head coach, I think that's the best time to do it. I think Miami should roll the dice and go with Tate Martell. All right, before we talk any more about the quarterback situation or Miami's roster, or who they lost, who's coming back, that kind of thing, let's just briefly look at last season. A disaster, no matter how you look at it, and Miami fans would agree, and obviously there aren't very many Miami fans who are upset that Mark Richt is gone. He was there 3 years, right? Second year, pretty good, won 10 games, made the ACC championship game for the first time in Miami history before getting blown out against Clemson, but last year just took a huge step back. Miami, I couldn't believe this when I read this. Miami has lost 9 of their last 16 games. That's unbelievable. If you go back to the last 3 or 4 games, even of 2017 when they ended up winning 10 games, they lost, their last 3 games of the year that season, the bowl game, the ACC championship game, and I believe it was Pitt they lost to the week before that. So they lost they lost all 3 of their last games in 2017, and that negative energy and negative momentum carried over, of course, into 2018 with a terrible year. You bring Manny Diaz in, he's been at Miami for a while as a defensive coordinator, takes a job as a head coach at Temple. 2 weeks later, Mark Richt announces his early retirement, and Manny Diaz returns back home to Miami, so technically never even really to coach at Temple, not for anything meaningful anyway, just 2 weeks there. 113th in America in passing last year. This is what Miami fans are going to want to see a big improvement in immediately. Miami's defense has played well over the last few years, and they've had some serious talent. And honestly, they've got some talent on offense too. We just haven't seen it perform consistently on Saturdays, and that's a little head-scratching considering the fact that Mark Richt is an offensive-minded head coach. You would expect the offense to be up and running quicker under an offensive head coach, and maybe the defense lagged behind, but that just wasn't the case over the last couple of years with Richt at Miami. So they bring Tate Martell in. It's going to be him versus N'Kosi Perry. Like I said, I think it's going to be Tate Martell. I think he's just the better, more talented player. And I think Miami needs obviously, and Miami fans would agree, a big change was needed. That's why Richt is gone and Manny Diaz is in. I think you should take the next step there and just move on from the whole N'Kosi Perry, Malik Rozier thing. Malik Rozier, of course, gone out of eligibility. I think it's best to just move completely on and give the job to Tate Martell. Well, I don't want to say give it to him. Obviously, you want Tate Martell to earn the job. I think Tate Martell will earn the job. I just think he's the better of the two quarterbacks. Defense should be great again for Miami. I don't think anybody will question that. Biggest question marks with Miami, quarterback position, and you got to replace some talented pieces on defense. Now, I think Miami's defense will be good again. Manny's a defensive guy. And let's just be honest here. Kirby Smart is from Georgia, played at Georgia, head coach at Georgia. Georgia fans love him, hometown guy type of thing. As much as Georgia fans love Kirby Smart, I don't think I've ever seen the type of infatuation that the Miami fan base has with Manny Diaz. And I'm not saying that's a bad or a negative thing. But Miami fans and the players, you listen to them talk about Manny Diaz, they're absolutely in love with this guy. Now, will Miami be talented enough to go 15-0 and win a national title next year? I don't know. But I do know that those players on that team will absolutely give everything they have every single day for Manny Diaz. They absolutely love this guy. The question with Manny Diaz, first-year head coach, there's going to be some mistakes made in my mind. I've seen it up close and personal at Georgia with Kirby Smart. As much as I love Kirby Smart, I think he's a great coach, great recruiter. We've seen Kirby sort of fold under the pressure a couple of times, some boneheaded decisions, not just in the big games. Obviously, those are magnified. You make a boneheaded decision in a national title game or a conference championship game, those bad decisions are magnified. But even going back to his first year, 2016, just some questionable things, some play calling. And while Kirby is not an offensive guy or the offensive coordinator, he's a dictator at Georgia. He has control over what's going on. Anyway, so the point is, Manny Diaz, we may look, 20, 30 years down the road, we may look back and say Manny Diaz was one of the greatest coaches of college football history. I still think he's going to have some issues year one. Will it cost you any games? Well, no one knows. But you have to learn to be a coach, a head coach, the same way you have to learn to be a quarterback or a defensive back or a defensive end. It's not the same being a defensive coordinator and being a head coach. I'm in no way suggesting that Manny Diaz will fail this year or that Miami will have a bad year. This is just my overall opinion on first-year head coaches. Now, you can also point to Lincoln Riley and say, well, he was a first-year head coach, and he's been to the playoffs every single year he's been a head coach. And you would be right. But for every Lincoln Riley example, I can point to 100 other first-year coaches who did not do that. So let's just try to keep that in mind when we're propping Manny Diaz up as the greatest thing since Bear Bryant, okay? What about your schedule? And we'll put the schedule up on the screen in a minute. You guys know the routine with these videos. You have one of the easiest schedules in America, period, and bar none. First off, the ACC, top to bottom, a terrible conference. Obviously loaded at the top with Clemson. There's not a better program in America right now than Clemson. You can point to Alabama. Alabama may be on the same level or close, but we just saw Clemson blow Alabama out. Anybody who doesn't think Clemson is the best program in America right now is delusional. They've won 2 national titles in the last, 4 years? They've won the ACC how many years in a row? So they are the cream of the crop right now. After that, in the ACC, though, there is no clear-cut second-place team. There's just not. Florida State has been down. Miami, you guys have been down. Who was the second, third, and fourth best teams in the ACC last year? Pitt, Syracuse, Virginia. These aren't exactly powerhouse teams here, and you guys benefit from that this year. If Miami can take a big step forward from where they were at last year, there's no reason Miami can't win the division this year. We'll see if that happens. But you look at Miami's schedule, right now, there's one top 25 team on their entire schedule, and that's their first game of the year, which we'll talk a lot about when we get to that here in a minute. Miami actually has 3 bye weeks. Now, I've taken the time in every one of these videos that I've done to explain the fact that every team has 2 bye weeks this year because of the way the calendar falls. It's not a change with college football. Just so happens the way the calendar falls this year, it dictates 2 bye weeks. Miami actually has 3 bye weeks, and the reason for that is Miami plays a week before the quote-unquote real college football season starts. In other words, I think most teams kick off on Saturday, September 1st, is it? Miami's first game is on August 24th. So if you guys remember last year, they had that week they called Week 0. If you guys remember that, same sort of thing this year. The week before most teams start the season, you're going to have a handful of games played on August 24th. And Miami is one of those teams. Because of that, they get a 3rd bye week. 5 road games, 1 neutral site game, and 6 home games. So a pretty even schedule. There. All right, let's just go ahead and throw the schedule up on the screen. I'll put it right over here for you guys to see. And we're going to do this the same way. We'll run through it really quick. I'll give you a couple of quick thoughts on a few of the bigger games here. We'll talk about the toughest 3-game stretch of games I see. We'll talk about away games. We'll talk about non-con games. And then at the end, we'll try to figure out, okay, if everything goes right and clicks and Miami plays up to their fullest potential, what's the best case scenario in terms of regular season record? And then we'll talk about the opposite. If everything goes wrong, maybe you get some injuries, the wheels fall off, whatever, what's the absolute worst case scenario, okay? So here we go. I mentioned game 1. That's the Florida game. That's the game for Miami this year. Now, I know the Florida State game is a big game this year, but you haven't played Florida in a while. This is going to be a huge non-con game. Interstate rival here. This is a neutral site game being played in Orlando. Florida's going to be a top 10 team in the preseason, and most people are going to be expecting Florida to win that game. I think I agree that Florida should be favored, and they are favored. If you look at the early lines that just came out for some of the bigger college football games this season, Florida is currently listed as an 8.5-point favorite in that game over Miami. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if that creeps up closer to 10 points as we get closer to the game. That doesn't mean Florida will win. It just means the majority of the people around think Florida is going to win. But this is the best team on your schedule. This is the best team you will play all year. Now, if you're a Florida fan, should you be worried at all about this Miami game? Yeah, I think you should, because like I said, there is a lot of positive energy and momentum around this Miami program right now. And I guarantee you, they're spending every waking second for the next 6 months, however long we have here to get till August 24th, 5 months, I guess, focused on that one game. And because it's played in week 0, there is no game the following week for Miami. So Miami can afford to sort of prepare for Florida. Miami can afford to take extra time to prepare for Florida because they have a bye week after that, which gives them an entire 2 weeks to sort of regroup or retool, whatever they need to do to get ready for the remainder of their season. It's going to be a huge game. I think Miami will come out ready to play. I think we will see the absolute best that Miami has to offer in that game, but I would agree that Florida deserves to be a substantial favorite in that game right now. All right, then you have a bye week. and then an ACC game on the road at UNC. UNC had a good season, back in, was it 2015, I think it was? They won the division. Should have beat Clemson in the ACC title game that year and sort of got robbed on a bogus offsides call on a onside kick at the end of that game. But anyway, that was ages ago now. Since then, they sort of fell off the map. They just haven't had very many good teams. Nobody expects them to be much better next year. Right now, when you look at the schedule, you're probably penciling that in as a win if you're a Miami fan. Then you got two non-con games. Bethune-Cookman, this should be one that Miami can run away with. Central Michigan, not a terrible team for what they are, but again, not a team that should be able to compete with a team that has the talent of a Miami. So that'll be another one that you guys are expected to win. That takes you into your next bye week. Coming out of your bye week, you have 3 home games in a row, all ACC games. I think this will be a critical stretch of the season for Miami. These are the games over the last 10 to 15 years, really, that Miami has lost during the regular season. Not all of them in a season, but you can look back at the Miami's last 10 to 15 season, and there's always 1 or 2 games against a team like Virginia Tech, Virginia, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Boston College, Syracuse, whatever, and you look back, how did they lose that game? Can Miami make it through those 3 games in a row? They're all at home. Miami does have a pretty good home field advantage, I think, when the fans decide to show up. And with this being year 1 of Manny Diaz, I expect fan support to be pretty high. Of course, Miami fans are notorious for giving up on the team when they're not any good. There's tons of images on Google you can find of Miami playing football games at home in the third quarter, and there's 10, 12, 15,000 people in the stadium. It's just pathetic and sad. A couple of years ago, spring game, I think they had 1,500 people there. So the Miami fan base is very fickle when it comes to supporting the team, but I expect a lot of support. I expect the home crowds to be rocking this year, with it being Manny Diaz's first year. But Virginia Tech, Virginia, Georgia Tech, a crucial 3 stretch of games there. And then you follow that up with 2 road games, ACC road games. And I think these are going to be tough games too. At Pitt, and then, of course, the big rivalry game, Miami at Florida State. The Pitt game could be dangerous because, let's be real, outside of the Florida game, when you look at Miami's schedule, the other game that stands out is this FSU game. Miami could be hot by the time that Pitt game rolls around. Even if you lose to Florida, you're most likely going to win those next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, right? If you reel off those 6 wins, you're sitting at 6-1 on the road at Pitt the week before that Florida State game. A definite trap game here on the schedule at Pitt. And then you follow that up on the road against your biggest rival, Florida State. After that, you host Louisville, one of the worst teams in America last year, another team that had wholesale coaching changes during the offseason. We'll see how they look this year. Your guess is as good as mine there. I don't expect them to be very good, though. And then you have your third and final bye week before ending your season with 2 away games at FIU and at Duke. And before you say, well, it's Duke, please keep in mind, Duke humiliated you last year, okay? You lost to Duke last year. Now, they had an NFL quarterback last year. They're not going to have him this year, but you got to play him there. We'll see. This Duke game, honestly, if Miami has a good season, right, and maybe they're have already won their division or just need to beat Duke to win the division type of thing, I would expect Miami to go in and roll over them. If sort of things go bad here, maybe you lose to Florida, you lose one of those 3 games, either Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Georgia Tech, maybe you lose at FSU, I could see Miami sort of giving up at that point in the season. We've seen them do that before, and then maybe catching an L at Duke. Don't expect that to happen, but I guess you have to at least consider it a possibility. I mean, that's just what we've seen Miami do consistently over the last 10 or 15 years, and before you blame it on Mark Richt, please keep in mind, Manny Diaz is the 7th coach that Miami has had since joining the ACC. 6th permanent coach. You had one guy coach 1 game on an interim basis. So really, I guess the 6th permanent head coach you've had since joining the ACC. None of those coaches have ever won the ACC. So, it's not, you haven't exactly been a powerhouse in the world of college football in the last 15 years. The Miami Hurricanes, no, it's been more like the Miami slight drizzle over the last 10 to 15 years. And I know you guys are looking to turn that around, and we'll see what Manny Diaz can do. All right, so non-con games, of course, Florida's the big one. You'll be big favorites in the other 3, Bethune-Cookman, Central Michigan, FIU. For the purposes of this video, best case, worst case, we have to at least consider the possibility that you lose to Florida, right? I mean, you're an 8.5-point underdog. They're going to be a top 10 team. Miami, Will Miami be ranked in the top 25 in the preseason? I could see them hovering around the 25 spot. We'll see. I think if they're ranked, it'll be somewhere in the 20 to 25 spot. They may be just outside of the top 25. They may be 22 or 23. That would be my guess. But we have to at least consider that as a loss for the purposes of this video. UNC, not really a reason you should lose to them or the two non-cons, Bethune and Central Michigan. This 3-game stretch of games here, Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Georgia Tech, for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume you lose one of those games, okay? So that puts you at 2 potential losses. I'm gonna give you a potential loss at Pitt just because of where it's played on the schedule before FSU, and a potential loss at FSU, although I think you're better than both of those teams. So that puts you at 4 potential losses. Can't see you losing to Louisville. Can't see you losing to FIU. Duke, I guess, is a possibility, although I don't expect it to happen. So for the purposes of this video, I think if everything goes wrong for Miami, maybe you get some injuries, whatever. Maybe it turns out Manny Diaz is a terrible head coach. I don't expect that to happen. Again, this is absolute worst case scenario. 7-5. I don't see any way possible Miami loses any more than 5 games. And I would be shocked if they actually did lose that many. Best case scenario for the Miami Hurricanes this year, I'm going to put it at 10-2. You have to learn how to win. And right now, the Miami program just isn't in a spot where they have really learned how to win on a consistent level. Talent-wise, you're probably as talented or more talented than 10 of the teams on this schedule. You know, Miami fans love to clown FSU, and I get it, bitter rivals. I do the same thing here. And Miami fans are going to spend a lot of time this season when they talk about this FSU game saying, we're going to beat FSU because they were terrible last year. Please keep in mind, FSU fan is saying the same thing about you, okay? You were terrible last year too. So if you think it's possible for you, Miami fan, to turn your season around in 1 year and go on a run, then you have to consider the possibility, at least, that it's possible for Florida State to do the same thing. I don't think there's anybody in America who thinks that talent-wise, Florida State is a 5-6 win team. Now, the coaching, we can question that, and for good reason. The coach has been a disaster there. We'll see if he gets it turned around this year. If not, he'll be gone, I'm sure. But you have to at least consider the possibility they get it turned around. But anyway, I'm just sort of rambling now. So, best case scenario for the Miami Hurricanes this year, in my mind, 10-2, and they win the division. I think Miami, is Miami the favorite to win that division? Again, that division is probably the worst in all of college football. So, you have to consider the possibility that Miami could win that division. Of course, which would be bad news for Miami because they're going to be matched up with Clemson in the ACC title game again, and they'll get throttled. They're just not on Clemson's level. But 10-2, I can see that happening, and a trip to Charlotte for the ACC title game. If everything goes really, really bad, I don't see it being any worse than 7-5. Again, I don't expect you guys to go 7-5. If you did, it would be a disaster with one of the easiest schedules in America. Again, to reiterate, you play one team that is a top 25 preseason team. You can't ask for an easier schedule. So if you go 7-5, you're going to have to do some serious head scratching and ask yourself a lot of silly questions about Manny Diaz, because that would be pitiful. But there it is, 7-5 on the low end. 10-2 and a trip to Charlotte on the high end. Appreciate you guys watching. Again, tune in tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do the Uncle Lou Show live, bringing it back. Took a little hiatus, but we're going to bring it back tonight. Talk some March Madness. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching, and have a great morning. And 2!
In the 305, bitches treat me like I'm Uncle Lou.